A small hand shot out of the dark and grabbed a fistful of black leather. It pulled hard. A man twice her size turned around, one boot still on the kickstand. Rain came down in sheets. The little girl didn't let go. Her feet were bare on the wet concrete. Her lips were blue. Behind her, a baby was crying somewhere in the shadows near the diner wall. She looked up and asked him one question, and her voice shook. "Are you an angel? We haven't eaten in 3 days." The big man said nothing. His name was Duke, and he had killed men with those hands. The waitress inside had already chased these kids off the curb once. Every other customer had looked away. What Duke did in the next 10 minutes turned that whole diner silent, and what he found across the highway was worse. Stay with me. Now here's the thing you need to understand about Duke Kowalski. He was not a soft man. He was 6'4", close to 260 pounds, most of it in his shoulders and his forearms. He wore the patch of the Hells Angels on his back, and the word underneath said Road Captain, which meant when the club rolled, he rode up front and everybody behind him followed his hand. He had a broken nose that had healed crooked. He had a beard going gray at the edges. And he had a face that made gas station clerks count their register twice. He had pulled off Interstate 15 for one reason: coffee and a place to sit while the storm blew itself out. That was it. He wasn't looking for anybody. He wasn't looking to be anybody's angel, but the girl was still holding his sleeve. He looked down at her, really looked. She was maybe 10 years old, skinny in a way that wasn't natural, the kind of skinny where you can see the shape of the skull under the face. Her hair was plastered flat to her head. She had on a thin summer dress in the middle of a cold desert rain and no shoes at all. Her toes had gone pale. "Say that again," Duke said. His voice came out low. "We haven't eaten in 3 days," the girl said. "Me and my brother, I'm not lying. I promise I'm not lying." Duke had heard a lot of stories in his life. Con men, junkies, people who could cry on command to get $20 out of you. He knew all of it, and he knew, looking at this kid, that she wasn't running a game. Nobody could fake that color in the lips. Nobody could fake those feet. That's when the dog came off the bike. You have to picture this animal. His name was Diesel, and he was a German shepherd who had lost a leg 2 years back on a stretch of highway outside Needles, when a pickup clipped Duke's bike and Diesel took the worst of it instead of his owner. 3 legs now. Scars across one side of his muzzle where the fur wouldn't grow back. He looked like something out of a nightmare, and most people crossed the street when they saw him. Diesel hopped down, crossed the wet lot, and went straight past the girl, straight to the diner wall. And there, tucked into the little dry space where the awning met the brick, was a shape wrapped in what looked like a curtain. A toddler. A boy maybe 2 years old, curled up tight, shivering, his eyes swollen from crying. Diesel did not bark. Diesel did not sniff and wander off. That 3-legged shepherd lay down in the mud right next to that baby and pressed his whole warm body against the child's back, and he put his head down over the boy's little legs, and he stayed. Duke watched his dog do that, and something in his chest went hard and hot at the same time. "That's Tommy," the girl said quietly. "He's my brother, he's littler, he cries more." "What's your name?" "Sadie." "Sadie." Duke crouched down so he wasn't a giant standing over her. His knees cracked. "Where's your mama, Sadie?" The girl's eyes darted just for a second across the highway, then back to him. She didn't answer. "Sadie, where's your mother?" "She's resting," Sadie said. "She's been resting a real long time. She told me to watch Tommy." Duke felt the cold of that answer settle into him, but he didn't push it. Not yet. First things first. First you deal with the thing that's killing them right now, and right now the thing killing them was 3 days without food and a storm coming down on 2 barefoot children. He stood up. He reached down and, careful as anything, lifted Sadie under the arms and set her up on the wide seat of his Harley, under the overhang where the rain couldn't reach her. She weighed almost nothing. That almost nothing did something to him. "You stay right there," he said. "Don't move. Diesel's got your brother. Diesel doesn't leave. You understand me? That dog will lay there till the sky falls. You're safe. Nobody touches either of you while I'm gone." Sadie nodded. She had the wide, careful eyes of a kid who had learned not to believe grown-ups when they made promises. Then Duke turned and walked into the diner, and the little bell over the door rang, and every head inside turned to look at the huge man in the wet leather cut. The place went quiet the way places did when he walked in. A trucker at the counter, 2 old men in a booth, a young couple who suddenly got very interested in their coffee. And behind the register, a waitress in her 50s named Carol, with a name tag and a tired mouth, who had, 20 minutes earlier, walked out onto that curb and told 2 starving children to get lost before they scared off her paying customers. Duke stopped in the middle of the floor. He looked at all of them, and then he looked at Carol. "There are 2 kids outside," Duke said. His voice wasn't loud, it didn't need to be. "One of them is a baby. They haven't eaten in 3 days. You chased them off, didn't you?" Carol opened her mouth. Nothing came out. "Every one of you," Duke said, turning slow, "saw those kids on that curb, and every one of you looked at your plate instead. Nobody moved. Nobody argued, because it was true and they all knew it was true. I'm not here to yell," Duke said. "I'm here to order." He walked up to the counter and pulled a roll of cash out of his vest, and he set it down where Carol could see it. "I want 2 burgers, no onions. A bowl of soup, the hottest thing you got, scrambled eggs, toast, buttered. A stack of pancakes, warm milk 2 glasses, and whatever's soft enough for a 2-year-old to eat, applesauce, mashed potato, all of it, now." Carol stared at him. "Sir, Now Carol." She read her own name off nowhere, jumped and moved. The whole kitchen moved. And while they cooked, Duke did something that no one in that diner ever forgot. He walked back outside into the rain, and he carried the toddler in one arm and led Sadie by the hand, and Diesel limped along beside them, and he brought all of them inside and sat them in the biggest booth in the place, and he wrapped the baby in his own leather jacket that probably cost more than Carol made in a month, and he never once let go of the little boy's hand. That's the picture the whole town would talk about later. A 1-legged patch and a 3-legged dog and 2 starving kids in a corner booth, and a giant biker cutting a pancake into tiny squares with the concentration of a man defusing a bomb. Sadie ate like she was afraid the food would be taken back. Duke had to tell her twice to slow down, to sip the milk, that there was more, that nobody was going to take it. The baby ate applesauce off Duke's finger, and Diesel lay under the table across all their feet, guarding, the way he'd been guarding all night. And when the worst of the hunger was off them, when Sadie finally leaned back with a full belly for the first time in days, Duke asked her again, gently, "Sadie, that motel across the road, is that where your mama's resting?" Sadie went still. She looked at the table, and she nodded. "How long has she been resting, honey?" "Since before the food ran out," Sadie whispered. "She got real hot, and then she got real quiet, and she told me to take Tommy and get food and not to let anybody put us in the system, and she stopped answering when I talked to her." Duke set down the fork. The motel across the highway had been closed for 2 years, boarded windows, a sign with half the letters missing. The kind of place the state forgets. And a sick woman had crawled into one of those rooms with her 2 children, and the sickness had gotten worse, and she had sent her 10-year-old out into the world to beg because she couldn't move anymore. Duke stood up from the booth. He was very calm. That was the thing about Duke. The angrier and more scared he got, the calmer he went. "Carol," he said, not looking away from Sadie, "call an ambulance right now. Tell them a woman's down at the old Sunliner Motel, room unknown, been sick for days. Tell them to hurry." He pulled his keys out. "And keep these kids warm. There's more money on the counter than that meal costs. The rest is theirs. You touch it for yourself, I'll know." Then he crouched one more time in front of the little girl, who had grabbed his sleeve in the dark. "You did everything right," Duke told her. "You hear me? You kept your brother alive. You found help. You did everything a grown-up should have done, and nobody did it for you. Now it's my turn. I'm gonna go get your mama." "Which room?" "Number 9, Sadie said. "The one with the blue door." And for one moment the diner was perfectly still, and outside the rain kept falling, and everyone in that room understood that whatever was behind the blue door was about to change something. They just didn't know what. Duke walked out. Diesel got up to follow, and Duke pointed at the kids, and the dog understood and lay back down. He guarded. Duke went alone into the rain, across the empty highway, toward a boarded-up motel with a blue door and a sick woman behind it. He put his shoulder to door number 9, and the old wood gave, and he stepped inside. And for a second he thought he was too late. The room was cold, colder than outside somehow. There was a smell of fever and old sweat and something worse underneath it. And on a stripped mattress on the floor lay a woman, maybe 30 years old, though sickness had aged her 20 more. Her face was gray. Her hair was soaked. Her breathing came in these long, cracked pulls with too much space in between them, but she was breathing. "Ma'am." Duke was down on his knees beside her. He took her hand, and it was burning up, dry heat coming off her skin like a radiator. "Ma'am, can you hear me? I got your kids. They're safe. They're warm, they're fed, they're across the road right now. You hear me? Sadie and Tommy are safe." Her eyes cracked open, fever glazed, trying to focus on the giant leather shape leaning over her. "Angel," she breathed. "No, ma'am," Duke said, and his voice broke just a little, and he'd have denied it to his grave. "No, not an angel, just a man. Help's coming, you stay with me. You already did the hard part, you stay right here." There was a moment there, a false, quiet moment. She was breathing. Help was on its way. Sadie had said her mama just got hot and quiet, and here she was, hot and quiet but alive, and Duke let himself believe for about 10 seconds that the worst was behind them, that he'd walked in on the last bad chapter of a bad story, that from here it was just a hospital and some antibiotics and a slow climb back up. He was wrong. It hadn't even started yet. Because that's when he saw the paper on the floor by the mattress. It was folded once, and her thumb had been resting on it like she'd been holding it when she went under. He picked it up. He read it. And everything he thought this was fell apart in his hands. It wasn't a note to her kids. It was a letter, and it had a return address printed at the top, and a logo, and a case number, and cold official language, and a signature at the bottom from a county he'd never heard of 2 states away. And what it said, in the flat voice these things always use, was that Sadie and Tommy were wards of the state of Nevada, that their mother, one Ray Ellison, had lost custody by court order, and that any person harboring these minors was subject to prosecution. There was a second page, a photocopy of a police bulletin, Ray's face, the word flight, and below that, in a handwriting that shook worse the further it went down the page, Ray had written her own note. They wanted to split them up. "Tommy to one home, Sadie to another. I ran. I know it was wrong. I couldn't let them take my babies to strangers in different towns. I got sick on the road. If somebody finds this, please keep them together, whatever it costs. Don't let the county have them. Keep them together." Duke read it twice. And then he heard the sirens, not one siren, 2. And under the ambulance's wail, sharper, a second sound, the whoop of a sheriff's cruiser. Somebody in that diner had made a second phone call. Now here's where it turned, and turned hard. Because Duke Kowalski, road captain, a man with a record, a man wearing a patch that every cop in 3 states had a hate for, was now kneeling in a boarded-up motel room over a woman with a fugitive warrant, holding 2 children the county wanted split up and shipped off, and the law was pulling into the lot with its lights spinning red and blue across the wet windows. He stood up slow. Through the broken door he could see it. The ambulance, thank God, real and needed. And behind it the cruiser and a deputy already stepping out, hand resting easy on his belt, looking at the Harley parked across the road and the diner full of witnesses, and putting a story together in his head. And Duke knew exactly what story that deputy was writing. Big scary biker, sick woman, 2 kids. It wrote itself, and it wrote itself wrong. If you've made it this far with me, do me one favor, hit that subscribe button. Because what these men did next, when the easy thing was to ride away and let the county sort it out, is the whole reason I'm telling you this story at all. Stay with me. Duke did not run. That was the first thing. Every instinct in him, 30 years of instinct, said get on the bike and go. This is not your fight, this ends with cuffs. He ignored all of it. He stepped out through the blue door with his hands open and away from his body, and he called across the lot, loud and clear so every witness could hear it. Woman's down in room 9. Fever 3-4 days. She needs the paramedics right now. The kids are in the diner, safe and fed. I'm the one that called it in. The paramedics ran. The deputy did not. He walked over slow and he looked Duke up and down, and he said the thing Duke knew he'd say. "This you're doing." "No, sir," Duke said. "This is me trying to fix it." The next 20 minutes were a blur of the right things happening for once. The medics got Ray on a board and out to the rig. Severe sepsis, one of them said grimly to the other. A few more hours and she's gone. A few more hours. That's how close it had been. That's what a starving 10-year-old stubbornness had bought her mother. Just enough time. But the deputy had that letter now. Duke had handed it over, because lying to a cop with a fugitive warrant in play only ends one way, and Duke had made a decision somewhere in that cold room that he was going to do this the hard, straight way. So the deputy read it and his face changed, and he got on his radio, and words like Nevada warrant and interstate and family services started crackling back and forth. And the machine Ray had run from 2 states to escape began slowly to turn its gears again. Toward Sadie. Toward Tommy, toward splitting them up. That's when the others came. You didn't think Duke rode alone, did you? A road captain is never really alone. He'd sent a call out from the diner's payphone before he crossed that highway, a call to a clubhouse 90 minutes down the interstate, and now the sound came up out of the desert. That low thunder. Headlights strung along the dark highway like a necklace. 11 bikes. Then 15. Then more. The Hells Angels of the high desert chapter rolling into a nothing town in the rain because their road captain had said 3 words on the phone. Kids need us. The deputy watched all those headlights fill up his quiet little lot, and his hand went back to his belt. "Easy," Duke told him. "They're not here for you. They're here for them." He nodded toward the diner window, where Sadie's small face was pressed to the glass, watching all those men she'd been taught to be afraid of pull up like a wall between her and the cruiser. "You got a warrant for a sick woman. Fine. She's going to a hospital, not a jail tonight, because she'll die otherwise, and no judge in America hangs a mother for keeping her kids together. And these 2 babies are not getting split up and shipped to strangers in 2 different counties. Not tonight. Not while we're standing here." "That's not your call," the deputy said. "That's the state's call." "Then let's make the state get out of bed," said a new voice. He was old, this one, white beard down to his chest, a patch that said President. His name was Cyrus, and he'd been riding since before the deputy was born, and in his hand he held a cell phone, one of those brick ones that cost a fortune in 1979, and he was already dialing a number. The number belonged to a lawyer. The club kept one on retainer, a sharp, mean woman named Delgado who had spent 20 years fighting the exact machine that was about to eat Sadie and Tommy. And Cyrus put her on with the deputy, and then with the deputy's watch commander, and then with a county family services supervisor dragged out of bed, and the questions Delgado asked were the kind that make bureaucrats sweat. Was there an emergency removal order signed by a judge in this county tonight? No. Then, on what authority were these children to be separated? Was anyone prepared to put a 2-year-old and a 10-year-old in the back of a squad car and drive them apart from each other in the rain with 15 witnesses and a lawyer on the phone? Was the county ready for that on the front page? The machine slowed. The machine stopped. That's the thing nobody tells you about the machine. It's powerful, but it's cowardly, and it does not like witnesses, and it hates the word lawyer. By midnight, it was done, and here's how it landed. Ray Ellison went to Barstow Community Hospital under police watch, alive, stable by dawn, the infection caught by hours. The Nevada warrant was real, but it was for fleeing a custody proceeding, not for hurting anyone, and Delgado made it clear she'd fight it into the ground and drag every reporter in California along for the ride. And the children. That was the fight that mattered. That was the whole thing. Because the county's plan was simple and cruel and legal. Emergency foster placement. Separate homes because that's where the open beds were. Sadie one direction, Tommy the other. A 10-year-old who had kept her baby brother alive for 3 days by begging bikers in the rain, about to have him taken out of her arms and driven away. She heard them say it. That was the worst part. They talked over her head, the deputy and the social worker who'd finally shown up, the way grown-ups do, saying words like placement and availability, and Sadie understood every one of them and she ran. Right out of the diner, past all of it, and she grabbed the only thing in that whole world that had made her a promise and kept it. She grabbed Duke's sleeve. Same hand. Same grip. And she said, you said you'd keep us together, you said. Duke got down on his knees on that wet asphalt, at eye level with her, and every biker in that lot went quiet, and even the deputy looked away. I did say that, Duke said, and I meant it. He looked up at the social worker, a young woman, exhausted, not cruel, just worn down by a system with no beds, and he said something that changed everything. You need a licensed emergency placement. One home, both kids, tonight. He pulled out his wallet and he took out a card and he handed it up to her, and on it was a name and an address. My sister, Corinne, 20 minutes from here. She's been a licensed foster parent for 11 years. 2 open beds right now. You can call the state and check her license this second. She's already expecting the call, because I phoned her the same time I phoned the club. That's the kind of man Duke was. While everyone saw the leather and the beard and the patch and the record, while the whole town looked at him and saw a threat, he had, in the middle of all of it, quietly made the one phone call that would keep a promise to a 10-year-old. He had thought 3 steps ahead of the county. He had built the safety net before the fall. The social worker took the card. She made the call. Corinne Kowalski's license checked out clean, 11 years spotless, 2 beds open. And there is no rule, none, that says a licensed foster home can't take 2 siblings in one placement. There was just no one who cared enough to make it happen, until there was. At 2 in the morning, a woman named Corinne pulled into that lot in a station wagon, Duke's little sister, 40 years old with the same crooked family nose, and she got out and she didn't even look at the bikers or the cops. She went straight to the kids. She crouched down and she said, "Hi, I hear you 2 come as a set. That works out great because I hate odd numbers." And Tommy, the baby, reached for her. And Sadie, who hadn't cried the whole night, who had held it together through hunger and rain and cops and everything, finally broke. She cried into a stranger's shoulder, but it was the good kind of crying. The kind that only comes when you finally get to stop being the grown-up. They stayed together. That's the payoff. That's the promise the whole story was making. They stayed together. Diesel rode in the back of the station wagon that night because Tommy wouldn't sleep without the three-legged dog that had kept him warm against a diner wall, and nobody had the heart to say no. The scariest-looking animal in the county curled around a 2-year-old in the back of a foster mother's car, keeping guard the whole ride home. Ray Ellison spent 11 days in that hospital. The Angels paid the bill. All of it. They passed a helmet around the clubhouse and filled it twice, and Cyrus wrote a check for the rest, and not one of them ever mentioned it again, because that's not why they did it. When Ray was strong enough, Delgado the lawyer went to work on the real problem, the custody case that had started the whole flight in the first place, and it turned out the original ruling had been a rushed, ugly thing. A mother with no money and no lawyer against a system that found it easier to file paperwork than to help. Delgado tore it apart. It took 8 months. The club paid for that too. Ray got her kids back. Legally, permanently, with her name cleared and the warrant gone. She got sober, though truth be told she'd never had the problem the county assumed she had. She'd just been poor and sick and alone, which the machine can't tell apart from guilt. And the town that had looked away, word got around the way it does. The waitress Carol, who'd shooed 2 starving children off a curb, showed up at the hospital on day 3 with a casserole and a face full of shame, and she couldn't look Ray in the eye, and Ray, who had every right to hate her, took her hand instead. Carol worked that diner another 15 years and never once let a hungry kid walk past her window again. Never once. She kept a shelf of food in the back on her own dime, and the regulars knew what it was for. Here's the part I want to leave you with. About a year later, there was a birthday. Sadie turned 11 and Ray, healthy now, working a real job, living in a small clean house near Corinne's, threw a party in the backyard. And she invited the club, all of them. 15 of the roughest-looking men in California, in the same leather cuts that made the town cross the street, sitting on folding chairs in a little backyard eating birthday cake off paper plates, and losing at pin the tail and letting a bunch of neighborhood kids climb all over their motorcycles. Duke was there, of course. And at some point Sadie, 11 now, taller, with color in her face and shoes on her feet, walked up to the huge man who'd knelt in the rain for her, and she tugged his sleeve. Same sleeve. The same grip. And when he looked down, she asked him the question again, but this time she was smiling when she said it. "Are you an angel?" And Duke, who had spent a whole year telling everyone he was just a man, who had denied it at the hospital and denied it to the reporters and denied it to his own brothers, looked at this kid he would have walked through fire for, and he finally gave her a different answer. "For you," he said, "yeah, I guess I am." Diesel, gray around the muzzle now, lay in the grass with his head across little Tommy's lap, 3 legs and a scarred face, guarding the way he always had, the way he always would. Nobody in that backyard said a word for a second. They didn't need to. Because everybody there, the bikers and the mother and the 2 kids and the little sister and the whole rest of it, understood the same thing at the same time. Angels don't always come with wings. Sometimes they come with a broken nose and a crooked patch and a 3-legged dog. Sometimes the ones the whole town looks away from are the only ones who look back. A little hand had grabbed a fistful of black leather in the dark, on the worst night of her life, and asked a starving question. And the answer, it turned out, had been yes the whole time. She just had to find the right stranger in the rain to ask.